Well, I didn't mean to be gone for that long. After I got over the whole coronavirus thing, I figured it'd be best that I take a step back from everything and just relax at home for a bit. Because of that, I might be a little out of practice, but let's dive in regardless. Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers Studio Series Leader Class Constructicon Scavenger. This figure was released in 2020 as part of Wave 4 of the Leader Assortment, and represents Scavenger's, and Demolishers more or less, appearance in the 2009 film Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. As licensed vehicle modes are normally reserved for the flashy and designer luxury sports car alternate modes for the Autobot Deluxes, Scavenger turns into a genericized approximant of the Terex RH400 mining excavator. This hefty piece of machinery is massive and is one of the most substantial alternate modes in the entire Studio Series line, possibly even beating out Jetfire's Blackbird form. The sides of this big vermilion box are steep and chiseled like a cliff's face. There is some vent detailing and staircases on each side to show just how big this vehicle is supposed to be, though I feel this excavator might be a little undersized if vehicle mode scale is important to you. The tread assemblies are mighty and cast a large footprint. They look like they could trudge along faithfully while lifting a load that would cause Atlas to pale, and that effect is helped along by the gleaming silver paint adorning the mechanisms. The main event is the girthy and powerful bucket arm that dominates this alternate mode from most angles. The sculpted detail on the arm is great, though the paint is more than a little sparse. It only covers the topmost hydraulic pistons, after all. It moves on 4 joints, one very tough ratchet joint at the base, 2 friction joints in the middle of the arm, and one last friction joint at the bucket. I'm not a big fan of the way the bucket looks. It's all segmented and unconvincing, which is kind of expected as it forms the robot mode hands. Sadly, this isn't the only instance of faults in the vehicle mode for the sake of compromise. I've been reviewing the Studio Series Constructicons in an order which more or less lines up with their release order, and Scavenger is the point at which I feel the figures begin to become more and more compromised for the sake of the combined mode, though I feel Scavenger might have it the worst out of the whole team. Turning the vehicle away from side on by any more than a few degrees in any direction will reveal that the exquisite exterior was nothing more than a fondant-esque facade meant to hide all the robot bits. Normally this would bother me, and this is a pretty egregious example of an insufficient vehicle mode. I feel Scavenger's kibble problems, or rather the lack of a disguise, is excusable in this instance, given just how cleverly he transforms and is able to reshape himself for both robot and combined mode. This is 100% a case of making it for the robot and combined mode first, and that naturally means the vehicle mode has to suffer. On the bright side, who's going to display the Constructicons in vehicle mode anyway? On that note, Scavenger's transformation borrows a few elements from the Revenge of the Fallen Legends class figure, as well as some inspiration from the Voyager class Demolisher from the same line. I feel this figure found a really good common ground between the two in terms of what to do with the treads. On Legends Scavenger, the treads just folded away onto the back while the wheels were hidden within the excavator mode, such as is the case for the top wheel on the Studio Series figure. Meanwhile, on Demolisher, that figure opted for a more screen-accurate transformation, with warping rubber treads being able to pull double duty. While Scavenger's excavator tracks don't bend and warp like Demolishers do, they do compress and combine to form the bottom wheel, with some help from some better hidden faux parts. While all of this is going on, the sides of the excavator peel away and compress to form shoulder mass, which I feel is more convincing than a few errant panels deserve, really. Despite the apparent complexity, Scavenger's conversion sequence is actually rather intuitive after the first couple cycles. My only caveat is that I recommend having a display stand on hand. Ever since Hasbro embraced the Display Stand Compatibility Institution back in 2014, there hasn't been a single figure which has benefited from the discovery quite like Scavenger here. While I emphatically adore and praise to the corners of the earth the wonders and glory of 2009-era Transformers designs, they don't make for very stable toys, do they? Revenge of the Fallen Demolisher was at least able to prop himself up using his arms, but Scavengers don't have quite the same kind of stability. You can try to balance Scavenger on his wheels, and I've managed to do it once or twice since there are big enough flat surfaces to just about scrape by, but one wrong move and he comes tumbling down like the Tower of Babel, a testament to Scavenger's own hubris. With that out of the way, Studio Series Scavenger's robot mode is an extremely well-made representation of Demolisher's on-screen model. Yeah, Scavenger never transformed in the film except to form Devastator, but he turns into the same model of excavator as Demolisher, so it's been pretty much accepted that Scavenger and Demolisher look the same outside of coloration. One aspect of this body type is that despite it lacking any sort of feet or legs, Scavenger's body still evokes the same shape as many other Decepticons' legs. His entire body is digitigrade, I mean to say. Just the shape of the sculpt is able to give this design such character, energy, and dynamism. The head sculpt is simply perfect, capturing every single detail from the on-screen model. I swear, the head sculpts present on every single figure I've seen this year have just been sublime. Since there isn't much of a body to have painted detail on, Scavenger's face gets accents of black and silver, while his eyes, or eyelids rather, are painted gold, meaning every relevant detail is picked out wonderfully. The abundance of paint on Scavenger's face doesn't mean that the rest of the body is bland and uncolored, however. The lower half of this cycloid body features gleaming silver struts, and more silver is revealed on the arms, which was hidden in vehicle mode. Last but not least, the rims of the massive tumbling wheels above and below Scavenger's head are painted silver as well, making them stand out even more. Now, despite Scavenger's appearance, he actually has quite a bit of articulation for such a design as this. Starting at the head, as always, he has something of a ball joint connected to a swivel that acts as a sort of double joint. It allows him to look up. It doesn't allow him to look that far down, but it does allow him to tilt his head and turn it slightly just to give it a little bit of expression and character, which I really like. The arms are where most of the articulation on this figure resides, mostly just because he's made out of joints from basically this point onward. So he has one big joint that allows the entire shoulder mass to rotate. It's on a detent, which means it will hold position pretty well. Many of the joints on Scavenger are detented in such a manner. Much like the outward joints for the arms, these are on a very heavy ratchet, which are used for the combined mode, so they are extremely sturdy. There is also an outward joint that allows his arms to point outward, and if you use the bicep rotation, it also allows his arms to reach forward if you don't feel like using this major joint. Like in excavator mode, the elbows do have a double joint that allow them to bend backwards or forwards, depending on your tastes. He also has a joint at the wrist that allows him to point his hand or raise it, and he has a joint here at what I can ostensibly call a finger. That's pretty much it for the arms, but they do feature an extreme amount of joints just for these arms, so you have a lot of options for how you want to pose him. There is also another joint here up at the shoulder that allows his arms to point outward that I missed because I usually just see it as a transformation joint, but this is yet another option. The lower wheel actually spins freely, and there is a nice amount of give to it, but that does come at the cost of not being able to stand him up very well, though that is what these stands are for. The upper wheel is locked for transformation purposes because it is attached to the base of his head, but that doesn't mean we can't have some fun with the other one. There is also a way to rotate it, and that usually means spinning this arm a little bit because the rotation joints here to spin the wheel kind of interlock with these shoulder joints, making them kind of move forward a bit. You could see it as an action feature, but I just see it as a reality of how else are you going to get this to happen. Either way, Scavenger has quite a lot of joints. You can do a lot with the guy, and I'm really impressed by just how much they were able to pack into this design, because as it is, Scavenger's design does not look like it is, accessible for proper adaptation via plastic, but this is a very nice surprise. Going back into vehicle mode is the simplest way to begin the transformation into Scavenger's combined form, as it is for pretty much all the Constructicons. Many of the initial steps needed to form the upper torso of Devastator are similar to the opening steps of the conversion to robot mode, though it begins to diverge by rotating Scavenger's arms 180 degrees to form Devastator's shoulders. The hidden wheel halves fold around and peg into each other quite solidly, and the remainder of the sequence is mostly just fiddling around with the central rotary joint to make sure everything lines up. Well, Scavenger's combined mode on its own is a whole lot of nothing, but I do like the general shape and proportions of it all. It's reminiscent of some errant few frames from the on-screen transformation, mostly due to one of the massive wheels being front and center. There is one issue around the back where Scavenger's face is plainly visible, but there is room between the wheels to hide it well enough. Scavenger's hefty shoulder joints double as Devastator's, though I'll go over the full gamut of articulation once I take a look at the combined mode, okay? Out of all the Constructicons I've covered so far, Scavenger would be my favorite. He's not my favorite out of the whole team, mind you, as I feel one other member outshines even him. There's just something really impressive about eking the single most accurate depiction of this on-screen model out of what is essentially a box, but Scavenger does it with a hefty amount of style and panache. I mean, it helps that the transformation cheats, but still. Despite his glaring issues, I still feel that Scavenger is a worthy experience, even if he's the only Constructicon you get. With that, I rate Studio Series Scavenger as astounding. If you liked this video or otherwise found it helpful or informative, then please subscribe for more reviews like this in the future, and feel free to suggest topics for future reviews in the comments. When we return, we'll be rounding out our coverage of Earthrise Wave 1. This has been Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.